In November 2019, the wedding bells will ring in Hawaii. Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell will tie the knot in an intimate ceremony. The two of them will be all alone. You can hardly make a more private wedding. Lori and her newlywed husband do have people in their lives who are close to them. Friends, parents, but also Lori's children. Daughter Tylee and son JJ are 17 and 7 years old. But Tylee and JJ are not present on Lori and Chad's big day. And there is a reason for that. Just a few months before her mother's wedding, Tylee was sitting in a police interrogation room. She was being questioned about a disturbing incident that occurred at her mother Lori's house. But during the interrogation, the teenager didn't tell the whole truth. She was trying to protect her mother. Because in the family of Lori Vallow, nothing is as it seems at first glance. In order for Lori and Chad to get married, some obstacles had to be overcome. But these are not obstacles in the conventional sense. There are people standing in the way of Lori Vallow and her new husband Chad. People from her immediate surroundings, and a dark prophecy. Lori and her siblings grow up in California. She has a particularly close bond with her older brother, Alex. Lori's life is typical of that of an American high school student. She's a member of the cheerleading and softball team, is involved in the church, and is popular with everyone. Her family follows the Mormon faith and attaches great importance to their religious beliefs. Lori is only 18 years old when she marries her friend from school. However, the marriage does not last long. After a few years, she divorces him. Shortly afterwards, Lori marries again. With her second husband, she has a son named Colby. But this marriage also breaks down. A third marriage follows with a man named Joseph. With him, she has her second child. Their daughter Tylee is born in 2002. The girl is an absolute planned child. Loris's son from her first marriage is also happy to be a big brother. Colby loves Tylee more than anything. In the mid-2000s, Lori entered beauty pageants. Among other things, she applied for the title of Miss Texas and appeared on a well-known game show. In her everyday life, she works as a stylist.
I have a wonderful husband, Joseph, at home, who is watching our two beautiful children, Colby, who's 7, and Tylee, who is 1.
Yeah, what do you guys like to do for fun?
We like to play all kinds of sports on our 3 acres.
Okay, sounds like you have a nice life there.
We do.
Congratulations.
Thank
Nice to have you with us.
To outsiders, it seems as if Lori has the perfect life. But according to her family, things are quite different at home. Lori's third husband, Joseph, is said to have repeatedly become violent towards Lori's son, Colby. After a while, Lori leaves Joseph together with Colby and Tylee. After that, Colby confides in her that Joseph sexually abused him at the age of 8. This is probably when something in Lori's mind changed radically. In court, a fierce custody battle for their daughter Tylee breaks out between Lori and her ex-husband Joseph. But the legal conflict is suddenly interrupted. One day in 2007, Lori's ex-husband Joseph is attacked. In a parking lot, someone injured him with a taser in the heart area. The culprit was quickly found. His name is Alex Cox. He is Lori's brother. She's said to have told him about the accusations against Joseph. Alex then decided to take matters into his own hands. Lori's brother injured Joseph with the intention of killing him. That way, he could no longer harm Lori's children and the custody battle would come to an end. But Joseph survived the attack. Alex was quickly arrested and went to prison for the taser attack. He and Lori were very close. Alex looked up to his sister so much that he would even kill for her. And the attempted murder of Joseph will not be Alex's last. In 2006, Lori remarried. Her third husband was named Charles. Lori brought her older son Colby and daughter Tylee into the marriage. Unlike Lori's first 2 marriages, This one seems to be lasting better. For her sake, Charles even joined the church and adopted Lori's Mormon faith. After 8 years together, Charles and Lori adopt a boy named JJ in 2014. He is the grandson of Charles's sister. JJ is autistic and needs a lot of special attention. Charles' family sees Charles and Lori as the perfect foster parents for the boy. He would grow up in a loving, stable household with a big sister and responsible parents to support him. Charles and Lori treat the little boy like their own son. Tylee also takes wonderful care of her little brother. For years, the family lives a normal, almost idyllic life. For a while, Lori and Charles live with Colby, Tylee, and JJ in Hawaii, where Charles and Lori start a business together. The family later moved back to the mainland and settled in Arizona. In 2018, Lori's ex-husband Joseph, who was attacked with a taser in 2007, died of a heart attack. It is not clear how this could be related to the taser attack 11 years earlier. Charles and Lori have been a couple for 12 years now. Colby has grown up and lives his own life. Lori and her husband live with their children. Tylee and JJ are well off and could live a comfortable life. If Charles were not killed in July 2019. A year before Charles dies, the relationship between Lori and him becomes strained. This is mainly due to a new acquaintance of Lori's. Lori and Chad meet at a church conference at the end of 2018. At that time, Lori is still married to Charles. Chad lives with his wife Tammy and their 5 children. Nevertheless, it is suspected that he and Lori were already having an affair at that time. The connection between Lori and Chad is so deep from the start that the two believe they were married in a previous life. Chad Daybell also grew up in a family with a Mormon background. In the course of his adult life, however, he increasingly distances himself from the Mormon Church. Instead, he joins a Mormon splinter group, the Church of the Firstborn. Since a near-death experience, he believes he has psychic abilities. He starts his own publishing business and also publishes his own books about his religious beliefs. Chad writes and publishes over 25 books that tell of dystopian religious scenarios. These include nonfiction and children's books, as well as novels for adults. One of the novels, for example, is about a couple who, during the apocalypse, have to use their faith to decide who is friend and who is foe. The whole thing inevitably reminds us of what seems to be Chad's reality after getting to know Lori. Even when they were apart, Chad and Lori's views were extreme, but together the two are a ticking time bomb. Lori is fascinated by Chad. She can readily identify with what he says. While both have their roots in Mormonism, they recognize numerous other shared beliefs. Among other things, the assumption that there are dark presences and ghosts, beings that can take control of people. And both believe that these dark spirits are among them. What's more, Lori Vallow seems convinced that her own husband is possessed by a dark presence. Shortly after she finds someone in Chad who confirms her spiritual fantasies, she begins to radicalize. She no longer believes her husband Charles for who he is. Lori believes that something dark has taken possession of her husband, and there is only one way out. This dark being must die. As previously mentioned, things are in a state of crisis between Lori and Charles. And not just because Charles finds out about his wife's affair with Chad. He also notices how she continues to drift away. Charles even calls in the health authorities on Lori because he is concerned about her mental health. During 2019, she became increasingly unhinged. Charles told the authorities that Lori had been talking about the end of the world. She was destined to save 144,000 people. Charles even sent emails to Lori's relatives warning them about her. He wrote that Lori was slowly but surely losing her mind. Lori has been a member of both the Mormon splinter group and the prepper scene for quite some time. She shares this hobby with her cousin, who even works for TV shows that follow preppers. Preppers are people who take various measures to prepare for extreme situations such as natural disasters or wars. Some of them, like Lori, stockpile vast quantities of food and everyday goods for this purpose. A real prepper scene has developed in the United States in recent years. However, the fact that Lori apparently assumes that she herself has been chosen to save thousands of people from impending disasters gives the whole thing an apocalyptic dimension that has nothing to do with rationality. Lori also accuses Charles of being evil personified. Before Charles is killed, he and Lori have an argument that results in the police being called twice. Lori has locked her husband out of the house they share. She has also stolen his car, emptied his bank account, and not allowed him to see Jay and Tylee. Charles then calls the police. The whole thing takes place in January 2019, 5 months before Charles' death. On the body cam footage of the police officers, he can be seen trying to explain the situation to the officers.
I've tried to support her as much as I could, but it's gotten really, really bad lately. She's had a break. She says, I'm Nick Schneider. I've taken over Charles's body. And Charles is I'm going to kill you. You're going to be murdered today or tomorrow.
The police officers ask in amazement who Nick or Ned Schneider is, but apparently no one at the time really understands what is going on with Lori and Charles. Even Charles himself can hardly find the words to describe the situation. Not even in the second conversation with another police officer.
And then she said that she would marry you through a spiritual...
No, she said, I can marry you.
I can marry you. And she's talking in a spiritual...
No, she's talking physically. I will kill you because you're not Charles, and nobody will care.
Okay, so she at this point doesn't think you are her husband?
She thinks I'm Nick Schneider.
Who's Nick Schneider?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's the name she used. I don't know where it came from.
Okay.
I'm just like, I'm as bewildered as you are. This is so foreign to me. Normal people as far as I'm concerned, but you know, this happens, it just drives me, I don't know what to do. I need help and she needs help. She needs help.
Unfortunately, no one seems to take Charles's plea for help seriously. Not even his family or Lori's family. Lori has told other relatives that Charles is cheating on her. Now he is making up tall tales and trying to paint her in a bad light. Within her spiritual circle, Lori has created an environment that is receptive to her questionable approaches. Almost everyone takes Lori's side. She even tells friends that Charles has been dead for a long time. The evil spirit named Ned Schneider has taken possession of him, and now the goal is to kill Ned, who is living in Charles Vallow's body. On July 11th, 2019, the police receive a call. The call comes from Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's brother, the same one who seriously injured Lori's ex-husband Joseph with a taser in 2007.
You need police or paramedics?
Both. I mean, police and an ambulance.
What's the emergency there?
I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
When Alex describes what happened, the operator calls in a colleague. She has a medical background. Alex describes a man who was shot in self-defense. The police hope to save him.
Is he breathing?
I can't tell.
Are you willing to go over to him and check?
Sure.
Okay, do you just let me know if you see his chest going up and down? How old is he?
It's not moving. He's 60.
Okay, and are you wanting to start CPR?
No, I don't know how to do that.
When the police arrive at Lori's house, there is nothing they can do for Charles Vallow. The 60-year-old has died from his gunshot wound. A few hours later, Lori and Alex are sitting separately in the interrogation room at the Chandler Police Department. Lori answers the police's questions in detail. She doesn't seem particularly shocked and even jokes with the officers. She hardly seems to notice that her brother has just shot her husband. Lori says that she and Charles had been living apart for a few weeks. Charles moved to Houston. Lori stayed in Chandler with the 2 children. Charles wanted to visit her and JJ to see their son. But Lori insisted that Charles stay in a hotel out of consideration for Tylee, because she didn't get along well with Charles. Lori had invited her brother Alex to stay with her and the children. She did not feel safe in Charles' presence. Her brother was supposed to protect her. At around 7:30 the next morning, Charles knocked on the door of Lori's house. Charles wanted to pick up JJ and take him to school. Shortly thereafter, a heated argument broke out between the two former spouses. The two were shouting at each other so loudly that Alex came over and interfered. Their 16-year-old daughter Tylee also witnessed the whole thing. After that, Charles and Alex got into a fight.
Yes, he was hitting him with the bat, like swinging the bat, back and forth, and they were kind of like on the ground, and I was like freaking out trying to go around, knowing JJ was in the car, right? And so then he got up and he had the bat like this towards me, and I was going around the other side to try to just get out of his range where he couldn't hit me. And then I had told Tylee, because she was on the ground, because after he took the bat from her, she fell back. And so I told her, I was like, go get in the car with JJ. Like, I don't want JJ coming in to the house, and I wanted her out of the way. I wanted the kids out of the way of whatever this fight was going to be.
After Charles was shot, Lori went to get the children. After that, she and Alex decided to call the police. So far, so tragic. If you only saw these interview clips, you might believe Lori Vallow, especially since her daughter Tylee tells a very similar story that fits her mother's account. Perhaps you could really assume that it was an accident, as happens so often in the United States. A quarrel that got out of hand, ended in a shot being fired and killing a person. But in the background are Lori's crude theories and views. With the death of Charles, she has overcome the obstacle that prevented her from being with Chad Daybell. On top of that, Lori is of the opinion that she did not kill Charles, but Ned Schneider, the dark being that is said to have taken possession of Charles. Of course, she doesn't tell the police any of this. And she also tells a completely different story about her husband's death to other people who do not belong to her spiritual circle. Shortly after Charles's death, Lori calls her oldest son Colby and breaks the sad news to him. Although Charles was not Colby's biological father, Colby grew up with him. Charles was the father figure in his life, and his death deeply shocked Colby. Lori told him that Charles had a heart attack. It was only later that Colby learned from his little sister Tylee that Lori's brother Alex shot Charles. Lori also kept the exact circumstances of Charles' death from his children from his first marriage. Instead, she sends them a short text message. In it, she writes, "Hi guys, I have very sad news. Your father passed away yesterday. I'm running errands and will keep you updated on what's going on. I'm not sure yet how to deal with all this. Know that I love you and your father loved you too." She also kept secret from his sons that her brother Alex shot Charles.
That she did that in that way. I mean, I wish she would have called me and said, "Can you please tell Cole?" But to do it so brutal through a text was just, I mean, it was horrible.
At JJ's school, she says that Charles committed suicide. Meanwhile, she's upset that she can no longer access the money from Charles's life insurance. He must have changed the conditions after all the conflicts between the couple. For Lori, it seems to confirm that Charles's evil spirit, Ned Schneider, must have orchestrated the whole thing. On the day of Charles's death, after she leaves the police station, Lori attends a friend's pool party. From now on, Lori spends most of her free time with Chad, whom she will marry at the end of 2019 on a sandy beach in Hawaii. A few months after her brother Alex kills her ex-husband Charles. 2 months after her children Tylee and JJ will disappear without a trace. And just 2 weeks after Chad's ex-wife Tammy will also die. The spiritual parallel world that Lori and Chad are building is difficult for us to see through. The supposedly evil spirit of Ned Schneider, who is said to have possessed Charles Vallow before his death, is not the only evil presence that Lori and Chad believe they can sense. The two consider themselves superior beings, a kind of reincarnation of divine figures. They believe they can conjure up natural disasters, harm people through the power of thought, and are destined to save the lives of tens of thousands of people as prophets. And to do that, they have to rid the world of dark spirits. That's why Lori doesn't believe that it was Charles that her brother Alex murdered. Her husband Charles had been dead for a long time and had been replaced by an evil spirit in his body. As mentioned at the beginning, Lori has always been a very religious person. She grew up with Mormon beliefs, and religion always played a major role in her everyday life. But around 2017 or 18, the situation changed, around the same time that her marital problems with Charles began. During this period, the mother of 3 begins to take a close look at near-death experiences. And it is precisely during this period that she meets Chad. Chad himself has already had a near-death experience. He was seriously injured while cliff diving and only just survived. Since then, he has considered himself a visionary. Lori and Chad seem to have very similar beliefs. Both assume that they have paranormal abilities and are destined for each other. In their visions, they both claim to have seen that time was running out. Lori and Chad are firmly convinced that the world will end in July 2020. Both Lori and Chad soon join the group preparing a people. According to its own statements, the organization has set itself the task of preparing the people of the earth for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Chad repeatedly appears as a speaker at the organization's events. The recurring themes are the approaching end of the world and the salvation of 144,000 worthy people, for which Chad and Lori are destined as reincarnations of higher beings. The two even manage to draw other people from Lori's circle into this spiritual world. Lori's brother Alex has long since become a follower of what will later be known as the Doomsday Cult. Now that Lori's husband Charles is dead, Lori and Chad are one step closer to fulfilling their prophecies in their crude world of thought. Nevertheless, a few more people stand in the way of their love, especially Chad's wife Tammy, but also Lori's children Tylee and JJ. In Lori's eyes, they are possessed by a dark force, just like Charles. Chad is firmly convinced that he can categorize people's souls as good or evil. His visionary abilities allow him to read people within seconds. And not only that, Chad has developed his own kind of death scale in his spiritual delusion. He believes he can sense when a person is going to die. The scale goes from 0 to 100, and the closer you get to 0 on the scale, the closer you are to death. In a text message to Lori a few weeks after Charles's death, he writes, "I've had an epiphany and come back to the death percentages that helped us track Charles, Ned, etc. Tammy is very close. Since Hiplos left, her percentage has steadily fallen. This is very gratifying." Lori replies, "What percentage is she at now, and what about JJ?" Chad writes back, "Tammy is at 3, JJ is at 2. 2 and 3%, not 0? Another person who, according to Chad, is also possessed by a dark soul is called Brandon. He is the ex-boyfriend of Lori's niece, who is also very interested in Chad and his spiritual scales. On October 2nd, 2019, Brandon alerts the police. Someone has shot at him in his own driveway.
911, where's your emergency?
Someone just shot my window. See them driving off.
Okay, someone shot at your vehicle?
Yeah.
On the phone, Brandon says he has no idea who shot at him. As it turns out later, he does know because he is afraid. Brandon confides in a private investigator that he has indeed recognized the shooter.
The person he recognized, the person he suspected was the person who did the shooting, was the same person who killed Charles Vallow, Alex Cox.
Fortunately, Brandon is not injured by the shot. It enters the driver's side window of his car. However, the bullet misses him. The boy is not the only one to fall victim to a gunshot, though. A week later, on October 9th, the police receive another emergency call. It is made by one of Tammy and Chad's sons. He reports that someone has shot at his mother. She had just returned from shopping when someone attacked her in the driveway of her house. Tammy herself also describes the incident on the phone.
I was getting stuff out of the back seat of my car, and suddenly he was there, and he had a paintball gun, and he was and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing. And then he just kept doing it, so I yelled for my husband, and then he took off running around the back of my house. He didn't say anything, or he just kept acting like he was holding the gun like he was, had a rifle and just shooting at me. So, but nothing came out of the gun either, so I don't think it was loaded.
Tammy survived the attack unharmed. But the incident was not a tasteless joke, but rather a harbinger. because on October 19th, 2019, the time had come. Tammy Daybell died. Her husband Chad told everyone that Tammy woke up from her sleep and suddenly started coughing. Then she vomited and died. The death certificate lists the cause of death as natural causes. Most spouses would likely be devastated at a moment like this. Chad Daybell, however, has a very different way of dealing with his wife's death. He later explained that he and Lori Vallow grew closer through their grief. They did so quickly, getting married just 2 weeks later. Lori's ex-husband Charles had died 5 months earlier after her own brother shot him. Chad's wife Tammy died 2 weeks ago, and now the two are getting married. Just the two of them, in a private ceremony in Hawaii. Not even Lori's children, Tylee and Jay, are present. On November 26th, police in Rexburg, Idaho are to carry out a welfare check. Lori is now living there with the two children. JJ's grandparents have contacted the authorities. They have not seen their grandson for months. When the police make the routine visit, they cannot find JJ. Investigators find out that he has not attended daycare since September 2019. When asked, Lori claims that Jay is currently in Arizona, staying with a friend named Melanie. However, it doesn't take long for the aforementioned Melanie to report herself to the police. She reports that Lori called her on November 26th. Lori asked Melanie to lie to the police. Melanie's gut feeling about the whole thing was so negative that she recorded the phone call with Lori.
Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Are you afraid of anything? Like, are you afraid to tell me that you're just afraid that that I could be in danger? Like like I don't, like if I knew, like how could that hurt me? I don't understand how that could hurt me if I knew where he was.
Well, I'm just not telling anybody so that nobody has to say where he is or get questioned to where he is, so I can keep him as safe as possible.
I'd always felt like a little weird in my stomach about all these things.
You know me, Mel. You know me. This does not sound like you. This sounds like you've been influenced by somebody dark who wants you to believe dark things and have fear of the celestial world.
JJ's grandparents are now extremely worried about the little boy and his sister Tylee. JJ's grandmother is Charles's sister. She gave him to Charles and Lori when he was a toddler. She thought JJ would be fine there, with a big sister, a loving father, and a caring mother. But now this mother is in a cult. The father has been murdered and the sister has disappeared without a trace together with him. If you already think the case is confusing and unbelievable, from this point on, at the end of 2019, it gets really crazy. When the police ask about the whereabouts of Lori's daughter Tylee, in addition to JJ, it turns out that no one knows where the teenager is at all. She hasn't been seen by anyone since September. While investigators are trying to see through the web of Lori, Chad, the children, and dead ex-partners, there is another death. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, is found dead. The man who seriously injured Lori's second husband Joseph with a taser and shot her third husband Charles a few months earlier. Just a few days before his death, Alex is said to have told his wife that he had hidden money for her in a closet in case anything happened to him. His cause of death, however, appears to be natural. He dies of a blood clot. But whatever the Idaho police are dealing with here, the case is bigger than initially thought. Tylee and JJ have not been seen for several weeks. The clock is ticking, and Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell seem capable of anything. On December 20th, 2019, the police publicly launched a search for Tylee and JJ. They say that their disappearance may also be related to the strange death of Tammy Daybell. Tammy's widower Chad and his new wife Lori are named as persons of interest. It takes until January 2020 for the police to locate Lori and Chad. The two are still in Hawaii. The police present them with a search warrant. Lori shrugs it off. She knows full well that her children will not be found with her. At the same time, a storage unit in Idaho is also being searched. Lori moved there with the children after Charles's death. Lori rented the storage unit in October 2019. That's about a month after her daughter Tylee was last seen. Numerous items belonging to Tylee and JJ are found in the storage unit. There are also items belonging to Lori's adult son Colby. It seems that Lori locked away everything in the small room that reminded her of her children. Their bikes, baseball jerseys, memorabilia, photos, and clothes. The storage unit's surveillance cameras show that Lori visited the storage room from time to time. She's usually accompanied by a man, probably Alex Cox, her brother. The two of them take items out of the room and bring new ones in. Although the storage unit provides no clue as to the whereabouts of Tylee and JJ, it does raise a dark foreboding. The fact that Lori stuffed all of her children's belongings into a tiny room and left them there does not bode well. On February 20th, 2020, the handcuffs click in Hawaii. Lori is arrested. She's now officially wanted in her home state of Idaho on suspicion of withholding her children's whereabouts. As a result, Lori is soon extradited to Idaho. Even in custody, she doesn't answer any questions about her children. Investigators are slow to get a grasp on the Doomsday Cult's events. It's a case that hardly any investigator has dealt with before. Police have to evaluate thousands of chat messages, photos, witness statements, and movement data in order to piece together the picture I've described to you in painstaking detail. Lori and Chad are obviously of the opinion that Tylee and JJ are zombies and possessed by dark presences. Just like Lori's husband Charles before them, the police are slowly but surely coming to the realization that they will probably not find Tylee and JJ alive. They are not looking for two living children. They are looking for their bodies, while their mother remains silent.
Tonight, a nationwide search for two missing children has come to a gruesome end. Family members confirm that the remains found on Chad Daybell's rural property in Idaho are the bodies of his stepchildren. Here's CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti.
When the dead bodies of Tylee and JJ were found, the months-long search for them came to a sad end. Tylee's body was burned. Dead JJ is still wearing his favorite red pajamas and is tied up with duct tape. While the police were still searching Chad's property, he got into the car and tried to escape. He was then also arrested by the police. This means that Lori and Chad's game will only be over for good on June 9th, 2020. For almost a full year, the two of them have been wandering around as a self-proclaimed pair of prophets. In doing so, they have left a trail of death behind them. Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, was killed by Lori's brother, Alex, who was also a follower of the Doomsday Cult. Alex himself died just a few months later. Chad's wife, Tammy, died under mysterious circumstances. Lori's children, Tylee and JJ, were last seen in September 2019. It was not until June 2020 that their bodies were found, buried in the garden on Chad's property. The case has become a real sensation in the U.S. in real time. For months, millions of Americans have been feverishly awaiting news of whether Tylee and JJ can still be found. There was great excitement about the murder of Charles Vallow and the death of Tammy Daybell. And the death of Lori's brother Alex also seems suspicious to many. The public is convinced that Lori and Chad must be to blame for the deaths of all these people, and all because they had fallen prey to a pathological religious delusion. But not everyone believes it. Chad has 5 children from his marriage to Tammy. And although Chad married another woman, with whom he had been having an affair for months, just 2 weeks after the mysterious death of their mother, his children stand by him.
Did your father, Chad Daybell, play any role in killing JJ and Tylee?
No.
Then why were their bodies found buried in your father's backyard?
I don't know, but I do know that if he were to commit a crime, he wouldn't be foolish enough to put the evidence in his own backyard.
They don't believe that he is responsible for the deaths of the people around him and Lori. Rather, the children believe that Lori alone buried the bodies of Tylee and JJ in Chad's garden, with the intention of diverting suspicion of murder onto him alone. However, this assumption is not supported by the authorities. Both Chad and Lori are charged. Lori pleads not guilty. She had nothing to do with the death of her children, nor with that of Tammy Daybell. The death of Charles Vallow is also being reopened. Although Alex Cox can no longer be charged after his death a few months after the fact, Lori's role in the case is now being investigated by the court for the first time. In the process, it is discovered that the version of events assumed so far can hardly correspond to the truth. On the phone with the emergency call center, Alex said at the time that he had shot Lori's then-husband about 5 minutes earlier. But that can't be right. After the attack, Lori took Charles's cell phone and drove off in his car. GPS data show that she left the house at 7:49 a.m. Lori said during the interrogation that she heard a shot when she left the house. After that, she went to Burger King and Walgreens to shop. Alex did not call 911 until just after 8:30, almost 3/4 of an hour after Lori had driven away with Charles' personal belongings. This implies that he waited a very long time to call 911, possibly to make sure that Charles would die before paramedics could arrive. Furthermore, the emergency paramedics stated that Alex had probably never performed first aid on Charles, even though the emergency call center employee gave him detailed instructions for a cardiac massage over the phone. This is because when the paramedics found Charles in the living room, there was no blood visible. Only when the trained personnel began to apply pressure to Charles's chest did blood emerge from the wound. If Alex had really performed CPR on Charles, it would have had to have happened during his resuscitation attempt. As is well known, Alex himself can no longer be questioned about the circumstances because he has also since passed away. Nevertheless, the new investigation results provide painful clarity for Charles Vallow's relatives. The version that Charles died in self-defense can almost be ruled out in light of the beliefs of the Doomsday cult. Rather, Charles's death was planned long in advance. Accordingly, Lori must answer for, among other things, conspiring to murder Charles Vallow. What is particularly tragic is that Charles Vallow's desperation is once again made clear in court. In the weeks before his death, he had tried to talk to Lori's family members about her behavior, but no one seemed to listen to him. Even Lori's son Colby now admits that he thought Charles was exaggerating. But Charles apparently suspected not only Lori's religious extremism, but also her affair with Chad. Just 12 days before his death, Charles Vallow sent an email to Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell. He wrote, "Tammy, my name is Charles Vallow. I have some crucial and disturbing information about your husband and my wife, Lori. This is your work email, so I'll wait to send you the evidence, which is quite disturbing. You can call me or email me from an address where you can receive the info. I'm sorry to be the one to send this to you, but something has to be done. I think it's best if I bring some clarity to this issue. Regards, Charles Vallow." We don't know whether Tammy read this email. What is clear, however, is that Charles confronted Lori with his suspicions that she was cheating on him with Chad. In a text message, he writes, "Just so you and Chad know, I'm going to talk to Tammy in person if I have to. I already emailed her. Your game is over." Lori replies, "You're wasting your time. They're both my friends. Just move on with your life. We're done. Let's just end it." A little later, Lori actually brought it to an end, in the cruelest possible way. The case of the death of Chad's wife Tammy is also reopened. Her body is examined again by forensic doctors. This time, a different conclusion is reached regarding the cause of death. Tammy Daybell was murdered. The mother of 5 was suffocated. This also invalidates Chad's initial claim that Tammy died suddenly in her sleep. The court considers it proven that Chad and Lori conspired to murder Tammy Daybell in order to get married. For the prosecution and the judges, there is no doubt. Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty.
Mom, I've prayed for you in my worst moments. I prayed for my siblings who swore to me we're okay. I thought I could trust you. I thought that you were a completely different person.
Before the judge reads the verdict, each defendant has the chance to say something. This also applies to Lori Vallow. Many defendants choose to remain silent in their situation. However, Lori speaks up. She still has something to say. However, they are not words of regret. Rather, she not only tries to justify what happened, but also to play it down.
Jesus knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn, my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen.
In her statement, Lori tries to put what happened into a different perspective through her religious beliefs. However, she still does not provide any information about what exactly happened. She implies that the deaths of Tylee and JJ were not murders. Then again, she talks about what a wonderful place heaven is and that it would actually be positive that her children are now there. She also talks about her own near-death experience. This has been a recurring theme in Chad Daybell's theories. Through his near-death experience, Lori's later husband saw himself as a visionary and divine reincarnation. Now, for the first time, Lori also reports that she narrowly escaped death. The situation occurred at the birth of her daughter, Tylee.
I have access to heaven and the spirit world. Since then, I have had many communications from people now living in heaven, including my children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, my sisters, Stacy and Lolly, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents. I have had many communications with Jesus Christ, the Savior of this world, and our heavenly parents. Because of these communications, I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world. Because of my communications with my friend Tammy Daybell, I know that she is also very happy and extremely busy. I have always mourned the loss of my loved ones, and I have lost many in this mortal world. However, I know them more than most people. I know where they are now and what they're doing. I know how wonderful heaven is, and I'm homesick for it every single day.
Lori's statement immediately before her sentencing not only gives the impression that she shows no remorse, but she also apparently still adheres to her spiritual views and assumes that she has not made a mistake. And perhaps that is one of the most shocking elements in this case. It shows that some people are firmly convinced that they are on the right side, even though they destroy or even completely extinguish numerous other lives in the process. Lori Daybell is sentenced to life in prison without parole. The prosecution believes that it is out of the question that Lori will ever be rehabilitated and able to return to society. The differences between her spiritual fanaticism and the real world are too great. Her husband, Chad Daybell, was sentenced to death. He was found guilty of the murders of his wife, Tammy, and Lori's children, Tylee and JJ. In all three cases, he was also charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and in the cases of Tylee and JJ, he was additionally charged with conspiracy to commit aggravated theft by fraud. The latter point relates to the fact that Lori and Chad continued to collect their Social Security checks after the children's death, so they even made money from the children's death. Lori Vallow Daybell will probably never live a free life again. Those she has hurt and traumatized through her actions are left behind. Her own son Colby, who has lost not only his foster father Charles and his siblings Tylee and JJ, but also his mother. JJ's grandparents, who gave their grandson to Lori and Charles at the time, believing that the boy would be well off with the family. the children of Tammy and Chad, who have to come to terms with the death of their mother and desperately cling to Chad's supposed innocence, and numerous friends and companions who are shocked by what happened. It is not for nothing that the case of the so-called Doomsday Cult murders is one of the most talked about cases in recent years. I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think that Lori and Chad will ever show remorse for their actions? Or are Lori's statements before the guilty verdict a final demonstrative sign that the two are too deeply stuck in their spiritual delusions? Have you perhaps experienced yourself how someone has drifted further and further into strange thought patterns? Feel free to write that in the comments. If you leave a comment, you also support the channel. Especially with such long documentaries as today, I'm always very happy about that. Alternatively, likes or a subscription for Insolito are also great support. Feel free to activate the bell too so you don't miss any videos and the video gets a lot of interaction shortly after the upload. This in turn increases the likelihood that the video will be suggested to people who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. Thank you very much in advance and thank you for watching. I hope you are having a good morning, afternoon, or evening depending on when you are watching this, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, bye guys.